Hello, everyone. I can see people are joining us already. We're gonna go ahead with the intros while more participants are still joining us. I have Kyle Poyar here today with me. Very excited to have you, Kyle. I'm Amelia, and I'm the VP of Marketing at UserPilot. For those of you who don't know, UserPilot is an AI-powered product growth platform which combines product analytics with in-app experience builder that allows you to create user onboarding flows for every stage of the user journey based on the data you get from the quantitative product analytics features and also from session replays, and then also collect user feedback using in-app surveys across desktop and mobile. And we've just literally launched our first product growth AI agent, Leah, who will be doing these product tours and creating the analytics report for you automatically. We just unveiled it yesterday live, so I'm super excited about that. I'm also super excited about having Kyle with us here today. Kyle is the author of my favorite newsletter, Growth Unhinged. Apparently, I'm not alone. There are around 80,000 people who are reading Kyle's newsletter every week. We had our case study at Growth Unhinged as well a couple of months ago. Like, I love how Kyle's newsletter is so actionable, and there's a ton of practical value reports, first-party data, case studies there, so go check it out. Kyle also used to be the operating partner at OpenView, which was a VC that coined the term product-led growth, and has a very, very rich background in being both growth operator, a hands-on, head of product growth, head of marketing. And today, Kyle is going to be talking about the monetization of AI products, which is a very exciting topic for a lot of us, myself including. So thank you so much for joining us today, Kyle, and would like to hand over the mic to you now after my long intro, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's all fun and games with AI products until someone brings up monetization. There's nothing that takes the air out of the room like that conversation. And so hopefully I'll be able to demystify some of that for folks and share some early learnings around best practices there.
And just to
Now,
butt in, if you guys have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A section. We will have 5 to 10 minutes at the end to go over them. So take the opportunity to ask Kyle things live.
cool. And can folks see my screen all right? I'll take that as a yes. All right. So how to monetize your product in the AI era. Uh, Now I've been working in software pricing kind of a while, and if I'm being honest, SaaS pricing used to be kind of boring. The old playbook looks something like this: you undercharge for your product, figure out who's getting the most value out of it. You build more stuff for them. You raise prices. It works. So rinse and repeat. As much as I love SaaS pricing, it was relatively uncomplicated. Uh, this playbook, worked fine for a lot of companies. It still works fine for some. It's not so great if your margins are, below 80%, and it's in particular not so great with AI products. And the reason why there's multiple reasons, right? One is that SaaS companies often grew slow out of the gate. On the other hand, AI products are capturing people's imagination. A great AI demo can go viral. And so an AI product can be hitting revenue milestones in record time. And if you haven't figured out your pricing at launch, you don't get another chance necessarily until much later on. The other thing is that, you just can't afford to make pricing a future me decision anymore. And so there used to be a lot of talk about LLMs are going to get 10x cheaper every year, right? You could probably see blog posts from A16Z, Sequoia, and others about that. Now, if you believe they're going to get 10x cheaper every year, the only thing that matters is distribution, right? You want to get your product in the hands of as many people as possible. You can offer low prices, unlimited plans to get that usage, and then you can monetize later as you save money on your LLM bills. But looking at the latest LLM prices, the best LLMs out there are still fairly expensive. They're not getting 10x cheaper. Meanwhile, token volume is exploding. So with these latest models, uh, they're often, able to have larger context windows, take advantage of more reasoning, take on agentic capabilities. And so token volume has exploded. Prices aren't necessarily coming down, and our users want access to the best models, right? They don't want yesterday's newspaper, they want today's newspaper. All of this means there are real costs and risks involved in getting AI monetization wrong. As I've worked with a number of AI companies, I've noticed that their top 10% of customers account for about 70 to 80% of all of their costs. Now, in these cases, if you get pricing wrong, your best customers turn out to be your least profitable or most unprofitable customers. It's really hard to build a sustaining business model around that scenario. The other thing that's happening here is that we used to be able to more or less copy the big players and assume that they had professionals on staff, they did the research, they did their homework. If pricing works for them, we can take a similar model and it'll work for us. So people used to copy folks like Salesforce or maybe Slack with their per user pricing models. What I'm noticing is in the AI space in particular, even the biggest players are still scrambling on pricing. And so Salesforce, when they launched their AI product Agentforce, they launched with a per conversation pricing model. Only a few months later, they introduced a new flexible flex credit model. Now they're saying that's the vast majority of their AI spend. And it's hard to kind of introduce new pricing models that fast, but I thought that was a great recognition that they probably got it wrong the first time around and worked really hard to course correct. OpenAI, meanwhile, has more seat-based pricing for their core ChatGPT product. Seat-based pricing also was the model for enterprise plans, but they've changed their enterprise pricing from seats to more of a pooled credit model starting in June of this year. And finally, I think folks might have seen this in the news, but Cursor, one of the kind of big players in the vibe coding or AI engineering space, shifted to a credit-based pricing model in June 2025 as well. They didn't do, probably the best job communicating it, and they faced real pushback, real backlash from their users. So all of this comes together and we can't take the old SaaS pricing playbook and apply it to AI products. Now, I think this is a really fascinating time. It's a really fun time. There's never been a more exciting time in monetization. And I've been doing this for the last 15 plus years. So I actually started my career at Simon Kucher, which is the largest consulting firm helping businesses to monetize their products. I was there for about 6 years. I was then an operating partner at OpenView, where I worked hands-on with portfolio companies over about 10 years on pricing and packaging, but also product-led growth and a number of topics. I think I worked about just about every company in our portfolio on pricing. All told, I've done over 100 pricing and packaging engagements. And I'm also just regularly talking to companies, doing research, conducting surveys, and I share a lot of that research in my newsletter, which is called Growth Unhinged. And I wanted to just distill the insights and observations from this experience into 6 rules for monetization in the age of AI. Now, to caveat, these rules aren't like hard and fast, you must do this, so you're gonna fail. These, you can think of these as rules of thumb, right? And we're gonna keep learning more as things evolve. So the first rule is how you charge impacts how much your customers will pay. And I want you to think about your last car ride. Did you buy a car? Did you lease a car? Did you maybe rent a car, call an Uber, or if you're in San Francisco, call a Waymo? Did you hire a chauffeur? Uh, Interestingly, these types of pricing models map to software and AI pricing, right? So buying a car is kind of like on-prem software where we had to make a big upfront purchase. Leasing a car is more like subscription SaaS with a multi-year commitment. Renting a car, that's kind of like usage-based pricing. Calling an Uber, that's outcome-based pricing, right? Paying for the ride. And then hiring a chauffeur, that's service as a software. So that's the company owning the full solution as opposed to just the transportation itself. And so with each of these models, I think one thing that you might think about is that, the old way of buying a car didn't go away, right? There were new options, more flexibility for customers. All of a sudden, the market size expands and there's more choice, but also more complexity involved in pricing. And with each of these models, the evolution is typically from ownership models to hiring models. And Each phase, in my mind, unlocks pricing power. So when we went from on-premise software to SaaS, we didn't actually pay less for software. What happened is we paid less upfront, right? Less per month or less in the first year. And so if the product didn't work, we could churn and we would pay less for those products. But we paid more over time for the best products. LTVs went up dramatically for SaaS products relative to on-prem products. And so looking at this, I think about this as, what percentage of the economic value that your product creates are you able to capture? So economic value might be direct, vendor spend displacement. It might be increased revenue growth, lower headcount costs, lower risk, right? Whatever the factor is around economic value. For on-premise products, they're only able to capture about 5% of the economic value. And that's true because customers have to spend a ton up front ahead of seeing the results. They don't necessarily believe you, and all the risk is on them to get it right, right? As you shift towards models around work-based pricing or success-based pricing, companies are able to capture 25% or more of the economic value. So it creates significant pricing potential. And that's because for the customer, they're only paying when they see ROI. There's the lowest possible risk for them. But this means that you're on the hook for delivering results, right? Because you're not getting paid if you're not delivering value. What I think is great for product people and growth folks in this room, though, is that the more that you're able to do to improve product results for your customer, you get paid automatically. And so any sort of product improvement becomes a revenue generating expense. And it really changes that relationship with the customer. The second rule is that there's more flavors of AI pricing than you might think. So study these models, be aware of the options. I've been tracking different disruptive pricing models in AI. These are just a subset of examples. I think I've got like many dozen more models. But as you can tell, they're kind of all over the place, right? Salesforce has both a per conversation and a credit model. Some companies are charging success fees. Some are charging based on usage, but they define usage totally differently in each company. There's not that complexity of we're all just going to charge per seat, right? And we all know what a seat is. I try to simplify these, and I think about them as about there being about five main flavors of AI pricing or just software pricing in general. The first are flat fee subscriptions. The second is seat-based pricing. Third is hybrid pricing models, which usually combine a seat or platform fee plus a usage or success fee on top. Usage-based models, and then outcome-oriented models. And as much as I and other people talk about, the death of seat-based pricing or some of the challenges there, the reality is that, there's no one perfect pricing model here. And it's really not a one size fits all decision. Each of these is going to have its advantages and the reasons why you should adopt it. And then each of these models is going to have its risks or the drawbacks. And where I think we need to get to as a community is just more conversation about the downsides of different models and then the things that we can do internally to mitigate those downsides. And so, for example, usage-based pricing models often have a lack of predictability for the customer. They don't necessarily know what their bill is going to be. So there's things that you can do around helping them forecast their usage in advance, right? There are things you can do around incentivizing your sales team so that they don't oversell on the initial deal ahead of that usage. There's visibility that you can put in your app so that users have more peace of mind because they can track their usage. But another, way that we can get folks more comfortable is the way we structure our pricing. So there's the pricing model, and then there's sort of the guardrails or structures that we put around it to make it more acceptable for a customer to buy. And so with usage-based pricing, for example, we could adopt pay-as-you-go pricing, right, where it's literally pay per use. But we can offer customers more certainty, right, with a pay-as-you-go model with a cap on spend, both at an account level or at a user level within the account, which I'm seeing more companies doing. We could offer usage-based tiers where someone buys a subscription with a certain amount of usage included. We could have overages on that or not have overages on it. Other models would be having a platform fee, so an initial flat fee, and then a lower price per use on top, so someone feels like usage is really affordable. There's all these kinds of models, and so these are going to be what allows you to offer more predictability for your customer and really make your model more attractive to them. Rule number 3 is avoid flat fees unless you have the margins to support them. Now, many of you might have heard of MoviePass. It's maybe more of an American reference, but MoviePass was the Spotify or Netflix of its day. They were trying to take that concept of an unlimited subscription and apply it to going to see movies in the theater. They initially charged $9.95 for a monthly subscription with essentially unlimited movies. This took off. This became huge. It attracted almost 3 million subscribers within a year. Now, I wasn't a math major, but if I do some rough math, this is a company that went from roughly 0 to 300 plus million run rate in a year. If this were in tech, we would be celebrating them as like the next Lovable, the next Cursor. They would be worth multi-billion dollars. But this is not tech, and the reality is they were burning a lot of cash. They were losing tens of millions of dollars per month, as the people that bought MoviePass were ones that wanted to see a lot of movies and often were extremely unprofitable customers. This ultimately led MoviePass to shut down in September 2019. Now, MoviePass has a flat fee model. Many SaaS and AI companies have a flat fee pricing model, even still to this day. And so when I surveyed 240 B2B software companies, 29% said that their primary pricing model was a flat fee subscription. 21% said seat-based pricing, which offers unlimited use for a user. 20% said usage-based pricing, 3% said outcome-based pricing, and then 27% had a hybrid model. So about half had flat fee or seat-based models. Now, what's so wrong about a flat rate? Now, anytime I ask customers if they want an unlimited plan, they tell me, yes, we absolutely do. This is great. We'll even pay more for it. But what happens when you have flat rate plans is that your smallest customers get priced out. It's too expensive for them. Your large customers and best customers pay too little. There's real risk of unprofitable customers among your power users, and there's no upsell motion. So my rule of thumb for you is that there's elements of flat fee models that could work. You can apply to your product, but try to have 2 or more levers to upsell customers based on either usage or product capabilities that they need. Rule number 4 is that the real opportunity is value-based pricing, and credits are a bridge to value-based. Now, I told you MoviePass shut down. That was only partially true. They've been resurrected more recently with higher prices and a new credit model. So this is a screenshot of their pricing page, right? They've got a basic plan at $13 per month with 34 credits, a standard plan with 72 credits, and a premium plan with 113 credits. I don't know about you, but this kind of looks like every AI company's website I'm seeing right now. Right? That they have credit models and then customers can use those credits flexibly based on different actions. And so in MoviePass's case, you could use your 34 credits in the basic plan to watch one movie if you want to see a new movie, maybe in IMAX, or you could watch 3 movies if you're willing to wait and watch more regular movies. These credits are coming really quickly to tech as well. And so I looked at pricing models 12 months ago versus pricing models now, and you could see there was a big decline in flat fee and subscription and seat-based pricing. But the real winner was hybrid pricing models that went from 27% adoption to 41% adoption. And what often happens in hybrid models is companies have a core pricing model that is seat-based, and then they include a certain number of AI credits in all plans. And then customers can pay more as they need more credits. It was a super easy way to layer AI into their offerings, get customers to use it, but also control costs, control profitability. The other factor here is that as companies kind of keep innovating and offering new AI capabilities, that can just all get folded into this credit model, right? You can just keep introducing new things that cost credits for your customer. And so startups used to tell me that their pricing was inspired by Salesforce or HubSpot or Slack. Now they're telling me they're copying Clay in the go-to-market space. And this is Clay's pricing model. All of their plans have unlimited users or unlimited seats, but you pay based on the capabilities that you want access to and the amount of credits that you consume. And then within a plan, you'll pay more as you consume more credits beyond the subscription. Now, I think these credit models are a brilliant model for now. They stop the bleeding, they stop the lack of profitability, they help us monetize AI. They're relatively quick things we can do without breaking our existing pricing. But I see credits as a bridge. And why are they a bridge? Well, a buyer is okay to buy in this way for their top vendors. But as soon as they have a couple dozen vendors that are all selling them credits, they're finding that they are underusing credits with some vendors, overusing them with other vendors. It becomes an absolute nightmare to manage from a CFO and procurement standpoint. And I see credits as a bridge to the real opportunity, which is moving towards value-based pricing, where pricing is more closely connected to the results customers see. And it turns out many, companies out there agree. So when I ask folks what is their expected pricing model 3 years from now, the biggest increase was in outcome-based pricing. So 5% said they have outcome-based models today. 25% expect that to be, where they go in the next 3 years. Rule number 5 is have the pricing talk with your customers. And so this is not, the rule isn't move to outcome-based pricing immediately. It's talk to your customers to understand how they see value. Now, outcome-based pricing is fantastic on paper. It's fantastic when it works. Like when it works, it really works. And one example is a company called ChargeFlow. They were a portfolio company of ours back at OpenView. Think really highly of the team. And so what they do is they work with digital sellers who are facing fraudulent chargebacks where their customers dispute a transaction on their credit card rather than returning an item or working directly with a vendor. This is a huge vector of fraud, costs merchants a ton of money, and the options to deal with this aren't really that great. And so ChargeFlow says, hey, we'll use AI to handle this on your behalf. Just set up your systems and we'll automatically dispute these chargebacks. We'll charge you 25% of whatever money we're able to recover for you. And for merchants, this is found money. Most of them, are barely able to recover any of this in their current way of operating. ChargeFlow can up that to about 60% win rate. So they bring you all of this incremental money back. It's money that you weren't expecting to get back, and they only charge you, not a flat fee, not a subscription fee, not a SaaS fee, only based on the results when there's actually money in your pocket. Now, this model works great for ChargeFlow. It works great for other companies, including Intercom and Sierra and a number of others. Really, for most businesses, is it sets up fights over attribution and predictability. And so by attribution, what I mean is you have to prove that you delivered the outcome. So this is an example of how Intercom thinks about a resolution, which is how they define their outcome-based pricing. Identifying and getting attribution for the outcome can be extremely difficult, right? You want the customer to be bragging about the great results that they saw. As soon as you start charging per result, they start questioning it, right? Did your product deliver the result, or was it mostly them with a small assist from you? Did you really resolve that, or did the customer come back later with another question, or do they just close out of chat because they were so frustrated? The other thing is predictability is, many cases that an even bigger nightmare with outcome-based pricing than it is with usage-based pricing. And that's because outcome-based pricing is unpredictability squared. You take a usage event that's already unpredictable, and then you have to guess what percentage of those uses are you going to be successful, right? So you have two vectors of unpredictability. And at companies like Intercom started out with only resolving about 20% of customer support cases through AI. Now they're up to greater than 60%. And so this has been great for their revenue. But for customers, it's hard for them to know, is this going to be 20% or is this going to be 80%? That's a 4x difference in the cost that they're going to pay when the bill comes due. So to understand whether outcome-based pricing works for you, you really have to understand the customer's perspective. And I think about this in terms of the CAMP framework. So there's consistency. Are all of your customers looking for the same outcome from your product? Attribution. Will customers give you credit for driving that outcome? And how can we prove it in the product itself, report on it? Measurability. Can we measure and report on outcomes in real time? Or do we require data from the customer or irregular one-off reporting. And then finally, predictability. Can we predict what the outcomes are going to look like in advance with accuracy? And the starting point to doing this is really getting really crystal clear around the economic value that you deliver relative to the status quo. And I thought Intercom has a really fantastic set of resources on this. It's worth checking out their blog, but they're able to do things like really highlight the cost of human-only customer support. And it's about maybe $6.60 per human support resolution. That allows them to really communicate the savings in their model, especially by only charging 99 cents per resolution. And so to do this, there's a lot of different ways that you can ask customers about price and value. I'm put 20 questions here that you can screenshot, or we can send you this deck later. But many folks, including product managers, growth folks, aren't that comfortable asking customers about pricing. But you've got to ask questions like this to get into their head and understand their psychology. The final rule is build with pricing agility in mind right now. So AI is changing really quickly. Your pricing will need to change. Like if Salesforce's does, yours probably will too. Plan for it. So you need to think about pricing before you build new products. So pricing is kind of part of that discussion early on. Optionality is your friend in the early days. So building pricing that can evolve is extremely helpful. It'll only get harder to change pricing in the future. Remember that. So, you actually should feel fortunate that you have less risk now than you will later. And for many companies, after they make a pricing change, I ask them, how did it go? What were the results? What was your change in win rate or conversion rate or price per user? They have a really hard time getting that data. You want to document those before and after KPIs, which will also help you understand how to keep evolving your pricing. And finally, don't let your systems hold you back. This is an ongoing process and you need to build for agility. And thankfully, there's a modern tech stack that enables that. And so in order to, be agile, you need someone to own pricing. At many companies, that is the founder. I think founders are great for making pricing decisions and being able to move with conviction, but they're not going to do the work to collect this pricing data, to interview customers. They need someone on the team to work with them to do that and kind of bring pricing recommendations to the table. And some good news, the silver lining in this talk is that we're in a golden age of pricing technology. There are dozens of next gen vendors that allow you to be way more agile with pricing and not be beholden to archaic billing systems. So these are the 6 rules for monetization in the age of AI. My personal perspective is that the AI boom will be an AI bust if we're not able to turn AI products into great businesses. And so pricing is really your path to AI growth, whether you're an early stage business or you're scaling to $15 million ARR and beyond. So thank you, everyone. And let's cover some Q&A with the time we have left.
Brilliant talk, Kyle. Thank you. So much food for thought. It was also interesting to hear your perspective on the credits, because the credit-based pricing of AI products did come up in a few of the earlier talks by Maya, by Chris from Value Ships. And their take was that credit-based pricing can be really good for the company because it adds a bit more predictability to, how much the users are actually going to be spending. But it can also add buyers anxiety because they ultimately feel like they don't know how much they will need to spend to achieve a certain outcome. And we even had some comments from the audience, like the example of Lovable, for instance, that, hey, you set out to build a certain project that you don't know you will make money on potentially, and then it ends up consuming so many of the credits that it gets pretty expensive to build. So my question is, how do you balance this buyer's anxiety with like the profitability consideration of the product?
Yeah, it's a really tricky balancing act. I think that the right answer depends a little bit if it's a more of a self-serve experience versus an enterprise experience. And so on the enterprise side, for example, like proof of concepts or proof of values are really great for estimating usage. I also think the better you can do to understand the customer's use case, the more you can help them get comfortable with what pricing will look like. And so if you're like a Twilio, for example, which has a very usage-oriented pricing model. They're mostly charging based on things like SMS messages. If your customer wants to use Twilio for appointment reminders, you would say things like, all right, how many customers do you have? What's your no-show rate of appointments right now? What does a no-show cost you, right? Is that money that you could be billing elsewhere? Now imagine we could send a text message automated, day before and day of for everyone. Imagine what that could do for our no-show rate and then therefore for our revenue. And so you start to be able to top connect. Well, so you understand what their usage is going to likely be, right? Based on their use case, the frequency of usage, the number of customers, and so on. You can estimate, roughly how many SMS messages they'll need to send. And you can help them see it as, oh, wow, for every SMS we send, we actually get 10x ROI because we're saving money by actually having people show up for their appointments. You need to really land that plane to get people comfortable with it. On a self-serve basis, it is a bit harder. I think having a free experience that allows a certain amount of credits does at least give people some initial sense and confidence about things. I also like the ability to essentially unlock certain free credits for certain features as a trial experience, even before someone upgrades. And so trials and premium experiences can be really helpful. I've seen some companies gamify that to add a little bit of fun to it. Apollo, for example, if you go in there onboarding, when you do things like set up your email or invite other people, you get credits added to your account, which like gives you some more confidence.
Mhm.
And I think that initial amount of credits, it's just helpful to have peace of mind that you have money in your bank account, right? Money to spend. I think the other thing I would flag is that for Lovable and Bolt and others, they initially did not allow for credit rollovers. And I think that to me, it's way more user friendly to allow for rollovers. So what I like to do is have annual plans unlock all credits up front so that people just have them ready to
Yeah.
go. They can use them whenever they want. And for monthly plans, let someone's unused credits roll over to the next month. It's actually an amazing retention driver too, because if someone has more and more credits in their account, like they're less likely to want to churn, and they're going to be more likely to go back to your product versus someone else's product.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, it sort of makes inroads into the initial monetization, but it's probably a more sustainable play to have these rollovers and kind of use them to boost retention, as you said. Let's take a few questions from the audience here. Neil is asking, which is something you partially addressed at the end of your presentation already. Will companies scale back on AI offerings if they end up costing more than what they earn?
Well, it's a good question. I think there's a difference between there's AI native companies, right, where their core is AI. And so in those cases, they can't really scale back on AI offerings. And then there are more traditional companies, like more say SaaS companies that add AI capabilities. And for those folks, I do see many of them either scaling back or saying, hey, look, most people just see value in some of the basic things like summarizing a document or something like that, rather than some of our advanced capabilities. And so they move towards simplifying, just including AI across their plans and maybe using AI as an excuse to raise prices. I think Slack, for example, used to have an AI add-on SKU. Fewer than 1 in 4 of their customers bought AI. And so they've since said, we're going to add AI in all plans and just charge a bit more for all of our packages. And we're probably not going to keep investing in AI, right? Because people aren't saying that they're going to pay for AI in Slack on a standalone basis.
Yeah, so it's about kind of seeing if you can actually monetize AI as an add-on to your core product offering, or maybe in this particular use case, it doesn't drive enough value for people to widely adopt it. And there are questions on the differences between B2B and B2C when it comes to AI pricing. I think it's a bit of a trick question because obviously it depends on the actual business model, product, audience, etc., etc. But are there any rules of thumb that you've noticed in terms of differences how AI products are priced in B2B versus B2C?
So honestly, many of the B2C apps in AI are like consumer to enterprise businesses. So they go to market seeming more like they're an individual user or consumer app, but they're ultimately going to make a lot of their money over time in B2B as those users invite their teams and end up becoming product qualified leads for enterprise adoption. And so in that way, you actually have to, even if you're B2B, you might have to think about how do you start with that individual user that's more B2C and be able to scale up. If you're B2C, you also have to think about your pricing where it is now, but then also how it can scale as you might move to B2B over time. So like there's a blurring of the lines. I'd say on the B2C side, there is an expectation of kind of being able to try before you buy. There's some lower initial price points, like people in the B2C context are willing to pay more between $5 to maybe $50 a month. At a max level, they're willing to pay a lot more in B2B. And they want things to feel super simple and clear. Although I think that credits still fit within that simplicity mode. So, for example, like there's a lot of apps in B2C that have a credit-based model. Even looking at like ClassPass in fitness, or I use Hungry Root for groceries. Like credits are very popular in gaming as well. And so credit-based models, I would say, are actually one of those things that are in both B2C and B2B.
Mm, yeah, yeah. So that is kind of the common ground, and yeah, like a lot basically depends on a particular use case. So it's hard to like answer this question for just the difference between B2B and B2C. Hugo is asking, what's the impact of usage and credit models in recognizing as ARR, which is a great question. Should we recognize it only when the credits are used or when they are purchased?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. I mean, one thing just to flag, ARR is not an accounting metric like revenue, right? So revenue recognition, there are very specific accounting principles that you have to follow. ARR is like an investor or like a strategic metric. And so if you look at publicly traded companies, each company has a different definition for how they recognize ARR. For some companies like Toast, they might look at for the payments component and usage components of their business, they might look at the last 3 months of business and do a trailing 3 months average. And then they multiply the trailing 3 months by 12 to get to an ARR figure, right? So some people try to smooth it out that way. Some folks will say, hey, we're going to do, if the plan is a subscription plan and people can pay more for credits on top, we'll recognize the subscription part of the revenue each month as essentially ARR. And then once someone moves into additional credits, we'll take that into consideration as like an increase or an expansion to ARR. I think get a lot more complicated. I think the big thing for me is that there's not necessarily a right answer. And so the big thing is just be clear around how you're doing it and why you're doing it that way, and make sure it aligns with like your business model and how your investors think about your company.
Yeah, yeah, because ultimately, the way of calculating ARR, which is sort of a predictive metric of future revenue, right, needs to adapt to these new pricing models. Because if we treat credit purchase as expansion, then the next month when fewer credits are being used, then is it a contraction? And this obviously can cause a lot of issues in actually reporting on ARR, on churn, on NDR, all the metrics that investors care about, but that may not, the traditional way of calculating them with like the subscription-based model may not be suitable for AI SaaS, for instance. What would you say?
Yeah, I think that the good news is like this is a solved problem. Like there are plenty of usage-based companies out there, and so there's many companies you can look at. And I would look at S1s for usage-based companies and kind of look at like how they're what they define as ARR, or if they even report on ARR. That'll help you really understand like what's most relevant for your product and what are some, guardrails about, what's expected. The big thing I just share is that many of these usage models, it's not really annual recurring revenue. It's more reoccurring revenue, or just, it's more of an annual revenue run rate rather than classic ARR. And so for many companies, the real truth is to move away from like ARR as a one size fits all like subscription metric and be more accurate about like what's your revenue run rate rather than like an ARR figure.
Mm, that's great point. Thank you so much, Kyle. Very insightful presentation and discussion. We will continue it on LinkedIn for sure. If anyone has any more questions, please reach out to Kyle on LinkedIn directly, follow his newsletter and engage there in the comments as well. We will be moving on to the next session shortly, so please stay with us. And again, Kyle, thanks so much, and I will see you around.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.